I'm Julie Mason. So pleased to welcome back to the show Pete Buttigieg. He's the 19th Secretary of Transportation. He tweets at Secretary Pete. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Wonderful to have you. So I-95 in Philly is reopened?
Yes, really pleased to see the teamwork, the collaboration, and the creativity that went on there. You had workers working round the clock, Governor Shapiro's leadership and the work of the Pennsylvania DOT, as well as our own federal highways folks really made a difference here. We got the funding available right away, and that means that I-95 is carrying traffic much ahead of schedule. Now, they're still working on the permanent repairs. That's going to take a while to fully reconstruct these bridges, but because they used an innovative strategy to create a temporary fix, traffic is safely moving while those repairs take place one section at a time. Obviously, a big relief for anybody who knows what it's like waiting in traffic on I-95. It can be tough on the best of days, and this was a real wrench in the works.
That's fantastic. In news of today, cleaner buses. Tell us about it.
Yeah, we're really excited about this. We've got funding going out to communities across the country, going to support the acquisition of nearly 1,700 new made-in-America buses. They're going to large communities and small communities. A lot of them have new zero-emission technology. All of them are going to have lower emissions than the buses they're replacing. We got $1.7 billion headed out to projects in 46 states and territories. So going to places around the country. You know, transit is such an important part of how people get around. And one thing I try to remind folks of, even if you don't use transit, you benefit when other people do, because it means there's less congestion on the roads for those who are driving. So really pleased to be able to support these transit agencies, and with these cleaner technology buses, that means cleaner air, less asthma for kids, and of course, less greenhouse gas emissions and carbon pollution going into the air as well.
Is this under the general heading of the infrastructure law?
That's right. This is one of the programs that was funded through that infrastructure law. We've got funding across 5 years, so this just represents this latest round of funding. And it's competitive. A lot of communities come in looking for help. We've been able to support communities in 130 projects just in this year's round, thanks to that funding. And again, it's needed. A lot of this equipment needed to be upgraded anyway, but it's especially great to be able to upgrade it with these lower emission technologies. Often they also mean a lower cost of fueling. So there's good taxpayer savings associated with this as well.
Is there a standard best practices for low emission buses?
You know, it does depend a little bit on the geography, depending where you are. That's where you see differences in terms of the routes. Is it hilly or is it flat? Do you have longer routes or shorter routes? But obviously the ideal is to be able to support zero-emission buses, often with electric technology. But even going to a natural gas technology is considerably better than a lot of the diesel that you've got. And these buses, if you ever have a chance to ride them, they're quieter, they're cleaner, they're a better ride. And again, most importantly, it means less health impact for the communities they serve.
In other news, meanwhile, something I've noticed, Mr. Secretary, there's been no griping from Republicans about disproportionate spending of that infrastructure money. And I was really braced for that. People really do keep track of, well, you're spending it in blue states, red states, but it seems to be quite evenly spread around. And I have to imagine that was deliberate on the part of the administration.
We try to be really intentional about getting these dollars out to where they are needed without regard to politics. And you'll see that in a lot of the announcements we've recently made, a couple more announcements that are coming in just a few days, where we really do make sure that rural areas and urban areas alike see the benefit. And sometimes it also is reflected in the program itself. I'll give you an example. We recently announced railroad crossing elimination funding. That's going to help with over 400 railroad crossings around the country that can either be eliminated or improved. And often it is in rural areas where there's that community crossing. Everybody knows that it's a headache. Trains get slowed down or blocked there. It gets in people's way. It's not just a convenience issue, but sometimes a safety issue because the fire department or ambulances get stuck behind it. And a lot of that is happening in rural areas. I was just in North Dakota, where they've been trying to deal with one of these intersections since 1991, and we're finally bringing the funding to do it. And I'll tell you, nobody there was talking about Democrat or Republican. They were just appreciative that we were able to get this done. But you know what? Even that program, we were able to do some good work in Houston and LA too. So we really do try to get the dollars out to where they're needed. We do it based on merit. Some folks will always grumble. I remember hearing from one person saying, well, 15% of this funding went to one state, California. How can that be? But, about 15% of Americans live in California. So I'm not saying it's always going to be mathematically proportional. Sometimes you have a greater need in a certain area, either rural or urban, but we really go out of our way to try to make sure that it's fair and that we're distributing the dollars in a way that Americans can get behind.
Which brings me to invest.gov. Can you tell us about this website and how people can use it?
Yeah, we don't want it to be a mystery where your taxpayer dollars are going. This is a lot of funding, and trying to make it less about the dollars and cents. You hear a billion here, a billion there. Trying to actually understand what it means. So invest.gov is a website that allows people to see where all this infrastructure money is being invested and get a sense of the projects across America. Also, something else I'm excited about, we also have, there's different color dots on the map to show you where some of the private investments happening. When you make good public investments in things like roads and bridges and utilities, you get good private investments that follow. It's something I saw when I was mayor back in South Bend, Indiana, that it unlocks a lot of private investment. We've seen hundreds of billions of dollars. That's a big part of how we had this record-breaking job creation that we've seen across the country in the last couple of years. So if you want to have a sense of where these dollars are going, if you want to have a sense of how some of these improvements are affecting your community, whether we're talking about airports, bridges, transit, or some of what the other departments and my administration colleagues are doing around, let's say, broadband internet or clean water or better school buses. Definitely encourage you to check out invest.gov, zoom in on an area you care about, maybe where you live, see those dots on the map, and get a feel for what we're doing with all this funding.
That's cool. That is invest.gov. Find out what infrastructure projects are happening near you. Mr. Secretary, finally, big July 4 travel weekend coming up. A lot of people taking the whole week off. What is travel going to look like, and especially air travel?
So we are expecting a lot of air travelers, and we're watching the system closely. So far this summer, we've seen major improvements compared to a year ago. Memorial Day weekend and Father's Day weekend had some of the highest travel rates we've seen since before COVID. And with that, the system held up quite well. We've seen generally month by month cancellations below 2%, but we're not out of the woods, especially when there's tough weather. We had weather issues and technology issues that led to a lot of delays yesterday in the national airspace. A lot of people getting ready to travel. I'm one of them, doing a lot of work travel and a little bit of personal travel around that July 4th weekend, and we'll be right there with you. If you do run into an issue, I want to make sure any passenger knows you can go to flightrights.gov. Flightrights.gov has information our department puts out about what you can expect and what you can insist on in terms of your rights as a passenger if an airline gets you stuck or stranded somewhere. And if you're really not getting a response, there's a way to complain to our department as well. We'll follow up. We're doing everything we can to have your back. So, again, cautiously optimistic. We've seen a lot of good work, a lot of improvements. Airlines have stepped up in the face of all the pressure we've been putting on them. But a long way to go, and we're going to be closely watching it all play out this weekend. So
you have some big July 4 plans? You and the fam doing something wholesome?
Yeah, we're going to have some good family time in Michigan. Going to hit the road a little bit, visit with some friends, try to go to a concert, but also a lot of work travel over the next week. I'm headed on later this week to South Carolina and Kentucky, look at some of the projects we're funding out there, and then the following week going to be in the Pacific Northwest and see some of the good investments that are being made there. There's every part of the country. We got good news to look at and issues that we're trying to solve too. So as usual, I'll be on the road quite a bit and experiencing that American travel system firsthand.
Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, he tweets at Secretary Pete. Mr. Secretary, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good talking with you as always.
Great talking to you. I'm Julie Mason. This is SiriusXM.